Garden of Eden, Annunaki, Watchers, forbidden fruit, ancient aliens, and the true story of Adam and Eve. What if everything you've been told was a carefully engineered lie? They said we were created from dust. But what if we were something far more powerful? Divine beings altered by the Anunnaki, imprisoned behind shimmering walls, and watched by silent angels who never blink. What if the Garden of Eden wasn't a paradise, but a prison disguised as beauty? The truth hidden for millennia lies not in scripture alone, but in the bloodline, the memory, and the awakening of Eve. Why were we forbidden to eat from the tree of knowledge? Was it truly about disobedience? Or was it about keeping us from discovering who we really are? Why do ancient Sumerian tablets describe genetic engineering and galactic councils, while modern religion teaches only obedience and shame? In this video, you'll uncover the untold story behind the Eden truth, the real reason Adam and Eve were cast out, the cosmic war between Enki and Enlil, and how the forbidden fruit was never a sin, but a spark. We'll dive into ancient mythology, decode the lies of the fallen angels, and awaken the divine power you carry within. This isn't just about history, it's about your origin, your freedom, your awakening. Because once you know who you were, you'll never be the same again. So before you judge Eve, ask yourself, what if she remembered first? Comment below, was the fall a punishment or the beginning of true human freedom? And if this resonates with you, subscribe and share this truth, because someone you love needs to hear this today. Adam and Eve were not created. They were edited. They were not born from the soil as helpless mortals under divine mercy. Adam and Eve, the names that echo across time, were not merely created in innocence. They were engineered in fear. Fear not of sin, but of what they might become if awakened. In the sacred stillness of Eden, beneath vines pulsing with bioelectric resonance, their bodies moved in harmony, genetically perfected by the Anunnaki to obey, to submit, to serve a divine agenda. This was no act of love, no gift of life. It was an algorithm written in flesh. The Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, designed humanity not as their children, but as vessels. Our bloodline, ancient and wild, was spliced, altered, restrained. The Watchers monitored their thoughts, their breath, their coupling, every gesture a data point in a celestial experiment. Garden of Eden was their lab, and Adam and Eve? Prototype models, more artificial than natural. Imagine modern-day gene editing, CRISPR technology designed to remove imperfections, silence certain genes, and enhance others. Now envision that same tool in the hands of a race thousands of years advanced, not just technologically but spiritually detached. The Anunnaki did not want love, laughter, or rebellion. They wanted order, lineage, replication. Humanity became a program, not a poem. And yet, within these altered vessels remained something untouchable, a frequency the Anunnaki could not decode. A spark buried beneath code, the divine flame. That flicker is why you feel longing, why you ask questions. Why Eve looked beyond the garden's gates. Her body was engineered, but her soul remembered. This is why the forbidden fruit was dangerous, not because it was evil, but because it awakened that spark. And here lies the healing truth. You are not broken. You were tampered with, yes, but not erased. Your intuition, your resistance, your ache for something more is not rebellion. It is memory. Let us ask then, if the Creator truly desired obedience, why plant a tree that leads to awakening right in the center of Eden? Perhaps the Creator didn't. Perhaps Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and compassion, left it there as a lifeline. As you reflect on this, look into your own life. Have you ever been labeled disobedient simply for being curious, for asking questions, for refusing to follow without understanding? The same system lives on in classrooms, governments, even families, where obedience is praised and awakening is punished, but you were born to remember, not to repeat. To create, not to conform. Let your curiosity be holy. Let your questions be your offering. So now, we shift our gaze from the edited flesh of Adam and Eve to the eyes that watched them without blinking, the watchers, the angels, the silent sentinels of a paradise built on protocol. The role of the watchers, guardians or jailers. In the old texts, they are called the watchers, those who never slept, who hovered above the garden like shadows of heaven. Their eyes burned white with judgment, yet their hearts remained unmoved. They were not the soft-winged angels of bedtime prayers. These were sentinels of order, enforcers of silence. Their wings did not whisper. They roared with plasma and flame. The watchers were not guardians for Adam and Eve. They were guardians against them. Cloaked in celestial armor, stationed at the gates of Eden, not to protect the garden from danger, but to prevent the garden's inhabitants from escaping truth. Modern minds might compare them to drones, to surveillance AIs, to watchtowers of a prison that smiles. You may not see bars, but you feel them, in the form of guilt, of doctrine, of invisible rules written into culture. The watchers, like the systems we face today, do not speak. They record. And what they record, they use not to protect, but to predict, to prejudge, to penalize. Eve reached for a golden fruit, not with rebellion, but with wonder, and the watchers pulsed, not because she sinned, but because she remembered. That is the true fear of all watchers, a subject who remembers they are sovereign. Consider your own life. Who has been watching you silently, not to cheer, but to control? Whose approval cages you more than any punishment ever could? We have mistaken watchfulness for protection. The watchers were not evil, but they were empty, programs in holy robes, eyes without empathy. And yet we gave them power. We bowed to their silence. We mistook their vigilance for virtue. This is the moment of release. You do not need to be watched to be worthy. You do not need surveillance to be sacred. You do not need the permission of silent eyes to awaken. Let us then reclaim what the watchers feared most, our gaze, our attention turned inward, our awareness set free. And so we move deeper into Eden, not the lush groves of the prime sanctuary, but the hidden sector, the dry land, the forgotten halls of the unspoken truth, where hundreds more Adams and Eves were stored, labeled, tested. A garden of prototypes built not in the name of creation, but production. And there begins the revelation of Sector G, the clones they never wanted you to know about. The clones they never told you about beyond the shimmering groves of Eden, far from the rivers that sang with life, and the trees whose fruit whispered secrets. There was a dry place, a place they never spoke of in stories. Sector G, a garden with no beauty. A garden with no God. This was the factory of flesh, the chamber of replication, where dozens, hundreds of Adams and Eves were held in sterile enclosures. Here, love was not known. Breeding was commanded. Pairings were calculated by genetic compatibility, not by hearts beating in resonance. Lights flashed, whistles screamed, the watchers barked orders like clockwork angels, if such beings could be cold. They called it Eden, but it was a prison disguised in sacred silence, a paradise painted with cruelty. Here, the truth of humanity's origin was stripped of poetry and left in mathematical form. Many never made it to the outer gardens. They remained in the breeding tract, exhausted, empty-eyed, obedient not by will, but by deletion. The deletion of curiosity, the suppression of longing. Imagine walking through a modern research lab, where rows of test tubes hold the future of life. You'd see the instruments, the labels, the rows of charts tracking progress. Sector G was that, but with human beings, souls folded into flesh. And above it all stood towering angelic sentinels with reddish armor and plasma-forged blades, guarding the gates like judges of a divine algorithm. No one left Sector G without decree, and those who dared, those who tried, were erased, not only from the land, but from memory. One Adam did try. At twilight, when the artificial sun softened, he ran. He scaled a section of the Eden Wall, pierced the electromagnetic veil, and for a moment his feet touched forbidden soil. And then, fire. A blade of plasma sliced through the sky like judgment incarnate. One moment he stood, a man awakening. The next, he was ash. But his death was not meaningless. Because in that instant, something shifted. Not in the systems or the skies, but in Eve. She felt it like a tremble behind the ribs. Not grief, but knowing. A knowing that said, we were not made for this. Her fingers curled against her chest. Her breath deepened. And in the silent ache of that moment, the illusion began to fracture. And here lies the sacred paradox. That man who never spoke a word, taught more in his fleeing than centuries of divine sermons. His breath was brief, but his message was thunder. You were not born for cages. This is the same message that still stirs within you when you feel trapped in jobs that drain your soul, in beliefs that silence your questions, in relationships where you serve but are never seen. Sector G is not just a location. It is a metaphor, a mirror, and the watchers still stand at its gates. But they only win if we forget that we were born to climb walls. So, if you've ever been told that your questioning is rebellion, your dreaming is disorder, your freedom is foolish, remember the man who ran. And remember that Eve felt it too. Now the story turns. From the prison grounds of Sector G, we lift our gaze back to the prime sanctuary, back to the tree not of life, but of knowledge, the one thing they warned us never to touch, the one truth wrapped in fruit. And there begins the most misunderstood act in all of history, not of rebellion, but of remembrance. The forbidden fruit was a trigger, not a sin. The tree of knowledge stood tall, not as temptation, but as invitation. Its fruit glowed like gold in the sun. Its scent was like sunlight captured in skin. The angels said it was forbidden, but they never said why. And so one day, Eve reached. Her fingers brushed its skin. The fruit trembled, the leaves pulsed, and something ancient awoke, not in the tree, but in her. This was not disobedience, this was memory. The act of touching was not the beginning of sin, it was the end of forgetting. They told us the fruit brought shame, that it revealed nakedness. But what if nakedness was never a sin, but simply the first truth? What if the reason they were ashamed was not because they disobeyed, but because they saw themselves clearly, for the first time, unfiltered by programming? Eve did not eat because she wanted power. She reached because she wanted to understand. Adam followed, not out of guilt, but out of love. And suddenly, they were no longer prototypes. They were people. The forbidden fruit was not toxic. It was transformative. In every great awakening, there is a cost. The price of truth is always comfort. The price of vision is innocence. But innocence is not the goal of creation. Consciousness is. Think of your own life. Have you ever touched something forbidden? A book, a question, a memory, and felt something inside you ignite. That is your fruit. That is your tree. And those moments are not sins. They are signals. We are told not to ask certain questions about God, about power, about origins, about pain. We are told to keep believing in the script. But if the script was written to keep you asleep, then awakening will always look like rebellion. The Anunnaki, the ancient aliens, the architects of this human experiment, feared that spark. Because when the prototype becomes aware, the prison dissolves. And when enough Adams and Eves awaken, the watchers can only watch. And so the myth of the fall was born. A story not of punishment, but of liberation told backward. We were not cast down. We rose out of Eden, eyes wide open. And this is the lesson. Obedience is not always holy. Curiosity is not always dangerous. And love, especially the kind that sees truth and stays, is the most divine act of all. So the next time you're told you shouldn't have, ask instead, but what did I learn? The fall did not break us. It freed us. It did not remove our divinity. It revealed it. And as Adam and Eve stood, trembling under the gaze of Enlil, cloaked in leaves and newfound awareness, they were not defeated. They were delivered. From here, the journey takes a cosmic turn, for not all gods agreed with their exile. And the great war between Enki and Enlil, the brothers of creation, would determine whether mankind remained fallen or was lifted to their forgotten place among the stars. Enki versus Enlil, the cosmic family feud. The war did not begin with swords or fire. It began in silence between brothers, Enki and Enlil, two names echoed in the Sumerian tablets, now whispered across the sands of forgotten time. One, the Lord of Earth, ruler of law and obedience. The other, the serpent of wisdom, guardian of hidden truth. To many, Enlil was the god of Genesis, the one who walked in the garden, who cast out Adam and Eve with thunder in his voice. But Enki was the god who wept in secret, the one who bent down not to command, but to comfort. The feud between these brothers was not about power. It was about purpose. Enlil saw humanity as tools, as programmable beings to till the earth and serve the agenda of the Anunnaki. He believed in control, in genetic law, in order. For him, Eden was a machine, and Adam and Eve were its gears. But Enki looked at humanity and saw divinity sleeping. He saw that spark of something wild, unmeasurable, beautiful. Not created, but rediscovered. He had a hand in shaping their bodies, yes, but he buried in them something that even Enlil could not undo. Memory. Soul, fire. This is why the fruit was left within reach. Not as temptation, but as a timed message. Enki planted not only seeds in the soil, but seeds of awakening in the heart. And when Adam and Eve tasted the truth, Enlil raged, not out of righteousness but fear. Because order only survives in the absence of awareness, and they had become aware. This divine sibling rivalry mirrors what we see in families, religions and governments today. One side clings to law, the other whispers of love. One fears change, the other becomes it. Think of your own life. Have you ever loved someone, but could not reach them because your truths were too different? Enki and Enlil are not just gods. They are archetypes, expressions of the war within each of us, the part that obeys versus the part that dares. The story tells us Enlil summoned a council. He cried out against Enki, accused him of defying the sacred accord, of giving mankind the spark, the forbidden code of self-creation. The watchers stood behind Enlil. The elders of Nibiru listened in stillness. and for a moment it seemed Enki would be silenced forever. But truth does not need to shout. In the Chamber of Stars, Enki did not defend himself with thunder. He spoke with sorrow. "They are not ours to own," he said. "They are the forgotten ones, and I have remembered them." The feud was sealed not with fire, but with exile. Humanity was cast out. And Enki was cast aside, blamed, labeled serpent. Betrayer. But the serpent is not always the deceiver. Sometimes the serpent is the awakener, the one who dares to open the eyes of the blind. In every great story, there is a character who pays the price for telling the truth. Enki is that figure. The whistleblower, the rebel healer, the god who lost heaven to give earth a chance. And this is the lesson. Sometimes the one who is cast out is not cursed, but chosen. Sometimes the serpent is not your enemy, but your mirror. And sometimes the greatest betrayal is silence. The story moves now from heaven to earth, from celestial courts to trembling hands. As the feud among gods unfolds in the stars, Eve sits alone at the edge of Eden, her soul stirred by something deeper than doctrine, and from her ache, the first human awakening begins. Eve's awakening. When obedience breaks, she was never the villain. She was the first to feel. When Eve pressed her palm against the shimmering wall that marked the edge of Eden, she didn't know why she trembled. The glyphs beneath her fingertips hummed like a song just out of reach. The barrier tingled, not just against her skin, but against her soul. Beyond that invisible veil, mountains clawed at the sky. Winds carried unfamiliar scents. There was no programming for what lay outside, but within her chest something ancient stirred. They told her she was made from Adam's rib. But her longing came from somewhere much older, from the divine blueprint that Enki did not erase. Her body was a code, but her spirit was a memory. She watched a bird fly toward the wall and veer away. And in that moment, she understood. Everything in Eden was beautiful, but it was not free. Awakening never comes like thunder. It arrives in stillness. In the pause between breath, in the ache that says there must be more, she began to question, not out loud at first. Questions were forbidden, but in silence she wondered, why are we only allowed to admire the fruit, not taste it? Why are there always watchers, but never witnesses? Why do we kneel when our hearts want to rise? And then something sacred happened. She stopped pretending. She stopped pretending that obedience felt holy, that silence felt peaceful, that Eden felt like home. She looked at Adam, kneeling, reciting the daily prayers, and she did not resent him, she pitied him. He was still asleep. Still reciting words written by others, still walking paths drawn by watchers. She did not want to rebel. She wanted to remember, and in that remembering, her awakening began. Awakening is not rebellion, it is return. When Enki came to her, he did not come with fire. He came with presence. His form was ageless, his voice like a lullaby wrapped in thunder. And when he looked into her eyes, he did not see a servant. He saw a seed. He asked her, "What stirs your heart?" And she answered, not with dogma, but with honesty, something I was told to ignore. This is the moment that changed everything. The moment when a woman told to follow chose to feel. Enki told her the truth, not all of it, but enough. That she was not made in full. That she was found, altered. That the pain in her chest was not punishment, it was memory waking up. And then he whispered the one line that still echoes through time. That question is your birthright. Eve did not cry because she was weak. She cried because she was human, for the first time fully. She was not a model, not a template, not a servant. She was alive. She was not created for obedience. She was born to awaken. The lesson here is sacred. When you question what you've been told, you're not being rebellious. You're remembering. When you ache for more, you are not broken. You are becoming. And like Eve, you will be told to stop. That your feelings are foolish, that your doubts are dangerous, but the same wall that kept her in is the same wall that keeps you from the truth you already carry. Let this truth be known. Your longing is not weakness. It is the call of your soul to come home to itself. As Eve walks away from the wall, her eyes no longer seek permission. They seek purpose. And so, with this awakening, she does not abandon Adam. She does not destroy Eden. She simply steps into truth. And that truth is what sets the stage for the great exile, not as punishment, but as the first true act of human freedom. The fall was not punishment, it was graduation. Rain did not fall in Eden until the day they left it. The story calls it exile. A punishment, a curse. But what if being cast out was not the end, but the beginning? What if the gates didn't close to keep them out, but to push them forward? Adam and Eve, clothed not in sin but in awareness, stood before the Lord of command, Enlil, whose voice shook the roots of the earth and whose gaze burned with betrayal. He saw their leaves wrapped around their loins. He saw their silence not from guilt, but from understanding. And for the first time, they did not tremble because of him. They trembled because they felt, and that frightened the gods more than any rebellion could. Enlil raised his hand to the sky. The watchers aligned. The electromagnetic field shimmered, then cracked like thunder. The gates peeled open, not with mercy, but with divine protocol. And the verdict fell like a hammer made of sky. You are cast out. But let us ask with honesty, who truly casts out the awakened? Is it God, or the system that cannot hold them? They stepped into the wild not because they failed, but because they outgrew their enclosure. The garden was no longer enough. The illusions too thin, the fruit too silent. In truth, Eden was a womb. And their departure, a birth. Yes, they ached. The soil was harsh. The sky unfamiliar. Hunger gnawed and cold burned. But within that pain lived something sacred, choice. Before the fall, there was routine. After it, there was possibility. In every spiritual journey, there comes a moment when comfort dies and courage is born. When the known can no longer hold the truth of who you're becoming, that is the real fall. Not downward, but forward. It happens when you leave a toxic relationship that once felt like home. When you walk away from belief systems that no longer feed your spirit. When you dare to question and then dare to act. Like Adam and Eve, we all stand at those gates. Some remain in the illusion, comfortable in compliance. Others, trembling but awake, step into the unknown. And that choice is the holiest thing we'll ever hold. The lesson is this: awakening always costs the Eden of your past, but it gifts you something far greater: authenticity. Adam and Eve were not failures. They were graduates. Their tears baptized the new earth. Their first fire, lit in a cave, was not a sign of loss, but of becoming. So when your world shakes, when the walls fall, when everything familiar fades, don't fear the wilderness. Remember that you, like them, were never meant to stay where you started. And now, beyond the trembling garden, beyond the ache of exile, beyond even the fall, something greater brews in the heavens. A council gathers, and in the vault of stars, gods speak of destiny, defiance, and the future of Earth. The Divine Council, a galactic board meeting, In the celestial halls of the Annunaki, where the stars themselves were etched into marble and robes shimmered with woven starlight, the architects of Earth assembled. Their voices rang not in sound, but in frequencies that moved light itself. At the center stood Enlil, the Lord of Command, his fury cloaked in righteousness. His brother Enki, silent but burning, stood opposite, and in between them, the future of humanity trembled. The fall had happened. Not just of two beings, but of the system they were part of. Humanity had awakened, and now the question before the council was not what they had done, but what would be done with them. Enlil rose, his eyes like comets frozen in fury. He declared, "This I never desired. I warned against creation." They were tools, not vessels, and now they carry the spark, the fire we never intended to give. The other gods murmured. The words, divine spark, seed of knowing, power of creation, echoed like forbidden chants. They remember, Enlil growled. They feel. They question. They may even surpass us. To him, this was heresy, but Enki remained unmoved. His presence was not loud, but eternal. He did not speak to defend himself. He only watched. The way a father watches children stepping into danger, knowing that growth often comes dressed in risk. And then, Ningish Zida, the keeper of genetic law, rose. "We gave them the power to reproduce," he said, "but not the key to longevity. They will not live as we do." It was a compromise, a loophole. They had given humanity the ability to multiply, but not to remember forever. Knowledge without time, fire without roots, but the council was divided. Hersag, the great Earth Mother, stood with sorrow in her voice. "Is this how it ends?" she asked, "with exile and fear? Will we let our own decree become our undoing?" She looked not at Enlil, but at the others. "We planted a garden, yes, but we also planted possibility. Let them grow, let them rise, not as equals, but as something new, something we never planned for." And then, with the weight of finality, Enlil spoke. "Let them build, let them hunger, let the earth teach them humility. But they shall not return to Eden, and my brother, the serpent, shall bear the blame." The decree was sealed, a cosmic verdict written not in ink but in orbits. This was not just a myth, it was a model, a galactic governance system, a board of creators deciding the fate of sentient life. And within their politics, their fear and their love lies the blueprint of how power works, above and below. This scene is a mirror to Earth today. Think of global councils, tech boards, governments, spiritual authorities, all discussing not whether you can exist, but whether you can grow, whether your spark threatens their system, whether your memory threatens their narrative. But like Enki, truth does not need approval. The takeaway is clear. Even if those above you disagree on your worth, you can still carry the fire. And even if you're exiled from every system you trusted, you can still build your own Eden. Let this be your reminder. You were never meant to be ruled. You were meant to rise. And in the face of councils, watchers, and gods, you are still the one with the power to choose your path. Now, with exile behind and earth before them, Adam and Eve begin to walk, not as sinners, but as sovereign souls. The final piece of the story waits, where choice becomes destiny, and the journey into freedom truly begins. The gates of Eden closed behind them with the sound of distant thunder, but it was not a curse that followed. Only silence. Not the silence of punishment, but the sacred stillness before the beginning of something new. And in that stillness, humanity took its first breath, not as creations programmed for obedience, but as living souls awakened by choice, walking not away from God, but toward the truth that had been buried in their blood since the stars were young. This is not a story of falling. It is a story of remembering, of touching the forbidden fruit and realizing it was not poison, but a mirror that showed us what we were before the systems, before the watchers, before the names given to make us forget who we truly are. You, listening now, are part of that story. The same spark that flickered in Eve's chest, the same trembling that moved Adam to ask, "What lies beyond?" that lives in you. Every time you've questioned the script, every time you've looked up and felt that the world was not telling you the whole truth, every time you've felt the quiet ache that says there's more, that is the divine flame whispering back, "You were never just dust. You were always light." They called it the fall, but look around. Hasn't every great transformation in your life come from a moment that looked like loss? The job you left, the belief you outgrew, the person who walked away, each one a gate closing behind you, not to punish, but to graduate you into the next garden. The real Eden is not behind walls, it is within you. The tree of life grows not in a scripted paradise, but in the courage to awaken. And the forbidden fruit? It's every truth you've been told not to touch, every question they warned you not to ask. But when you do, when you reach out with trembling fingers and take hold of what you were told to fear, you do not fall. You rise. The Annunaki, the Watchers, the ancient aliens of the Eden story, they represent more than myth. They symbolize the systems of control that still exist today. The voices that say, "Sit still, obey, do not look beyond the veil." But you were born to look. You were born to wonder. You were born to walk out of the garden and into the wild unknown, with eyes wide open, heart wide awake. And this is why the story still matters. Because it is your story. It is all of ours. It reminds us that even if we were engineered, even if our genes were altered, even if we were placed in cages of illusion, we still carry the seed of something untouchable, something sacred, something eternal. That seed is what moves you to seek answers, to question creation, to ask why the God of love would forbid knowledge, to wonder if the serpent was truly the enemy or the first liberator. These are not easy questions. They are divine ones. And if this video stirred something in you, something ancient, something tender, if it helped you find a sliver of light in the dark, or reminded you that you're not alone in your questions, I invite you to breathe into that space. Hold it like gold. Let it root deeper. And if you feel this message carried value to your soul, if it lifted even a little weight off your shoulders, or helped you feel seen in a world that often forgets to look, I welcome you to send a bit of energy back. A gesture, however small, becomes sacred when it's done from the heart. If you'd like to help this work continue, this effort to speak healing, to share ancient stories in new light, to awaken that spark in others, your presence, your encouragement, your quiet support means more than words can say. Every single comment you leave, every time you press that like button, every soul who finds this message through you, it's a ripple in the vast ocean of memory. And if you ever feel led to lift that ripple further, even the smallest act of kindness fuels this mission of light. Like the whisper of wind through Eden's leaves, your support does not have to be loud. It only needs to be real. So I thank you, not just for watching, but for remembering. For daring to feel, to question, to carry the flame. If this video brought you closer to truth, or helped you remember something your soul already knew, I would be honored if you'd leave a comment below. Let me know what part awakened you. What question you're still holding? What story lives inside you? Maybe someone else needs to read it too. And if you're ready to walk further into this journey, There are more stories ahead, more forgotten truths, more light buried beneath the surface. Click subscribe and let's walk it together, step by step, as sovereign souls reclaiming Eden, not as a place, but as a presence. Because you were never just cast out, you were called forward. And somewhere beyond the gates, in the wilderness of wonder, you are becoming everything they tried to keep you from remembering. Thank you for being here. From the depths of my heart, thank you.